Good afternoon, colleagues. In a few minutes, we will formally start this session. In the meantime, please take a few seconds to look at the technical information. The webinar will be recorded and that will be made available after the event. Please keep your microphone muted. That ensures a better quality for all of us. For questions, please use the Q&A button on the control bar. And you also can make comments in the chat box. We will try to pick these up and to discuss these with the panelists. And to facilitate participation, there is closed captioning available, and that means that you will have in real time, in writing, what is said by the different speakers. That can facilitate participation for all of us, especially for those for whom English is not their first language, like for me. Let's take another 1 or 2 minutes and then we start. Good afternoon, colleagues. More people are joining, so let's go to the technical slides so that I can go with you through the technical details. Dimitri, can we have the technical slide, please? Thank you. This webinar will be recorded and that will be made available afterwards. Please keep your microphone muted. That is better for the quality for all of us, I think. If you have a question, use the Q&A button on the control bar, and you also can share comments in the chat box. To facilitate participation, we have closed captioning, and that means that we have in real time, in writing, what is said by the speakers. All you have to do is to go to the captioning box and activate it. Okay, good. In a few seconds, we start. Good afternoon, dear participants, dear colleagues. Welcome at this event focusing on the role that the European Union might play or should play in making the labor market in Europe more inclusive. This webinar is organized by an informal network of organizations having similar policy objectives. We decided to join forces regarding some of the work that we do. Our partners are, next to ESPD, my organization, also EDF, the European Disability Forum, ENSI, the Network of Social Integration Enterprises, EUSE, the Network Promoting Supported Employment, Workability International, and EPR, the European Platform for Rehabilitation. I'm Luc Zelderlo, Secretary General of ESPD. Together we developed a joint message to the European policymakers, and that is what we would like to discuss this afternoon. Knowing that we do this in a very difficult situation, a very difficult context. COVID-19 indeed leaves a dark shadow over employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. We hear more and more reports from across the European continent stating that there are no more jobs available for people with support needs. Dear participants, we'll discuss the role of the European Union regarding the development of a more inclusive labor market. As we all know, a job, an income, friends at the workplace, it is all so important. It makes us to whom we are. It makes us to the individuals we want to be. And that is why we want to have this event this afternoon. Employment is a human right, and that is clearly stipulated in Article 27 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability. And that article talks about dignity, income, social protection, independence. And it requires focusing on abilities instead of getting locked up in disabilities. We also know that the employment rate for persons with a disability is far below the EU average in the general population. In the general population of people at working age, over 75% of the people are at work, have a job. Zooming in on persons with disabilities, we see that less than 50% are at work, have a job. And as I said already, we discussed this in the context of COVID-19. The crisis, the lockdown, the impact on the economy has hit social services and social service providers hard, but it has even hit persons with a disability harder. From across Europe, as I said already, very negative reports. And we know that a person unemployed means untapped creativity and potential. And that is a waste, and we should try to stop this. All this, and in this context, the European Union launched a very important recovery plan with a focus on green jobs and a digital transition. We think that this transition also should be inclusive. 1.8 trillion altogether. These 1.8 trillion should also bring recovery for the employment opportunities for persons with a disability and their services. In the same context, we are discussing an action plan for the social pillar, an action plan on social economy, and a new disability strategy will be launched pretty soon. Dear colleagues, dear participants, we have an excellent panel to discuss all this afternoon. We have Mr. Trömmel from the ILO. We have from the European Parliament, Madame Langensiepen and Mr. Jusemaier. We have from the Portuguese presidency, Bruno Ribeiro Barata, and we have from DG Employment, Ms. Katarina Ivankovic. All welcome at this event. We look forward to discuss things with you. But for now, I would like to start with our special guests. Indeed, we have a special guest with us to start this event. Madame Sophie Cluzel. Madame, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to speak at this important event organized by so many very significant, important networks active at European level. You are Secretary of State on Persons with a Disability in France, and I'm sure that you also will play an important role in designing the plans that France will try to implement during your next year's presidency. Can I ask you a question? How do you see the role of the European Union with regard to creating a more inclusive labor market in Europe and in France? Please, Madame Cluzel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zordalu, for your invitation. I'm very happy to be with all of you. Very happy because I think that 10 years ago, the European Union ratified the United Nations Convention, as you said, of the rights of persons with disabilities. And for me, it's the first human rights convention to which the EU has become a party, ushering in a new era in which respect and responsibility for the rights of people with disability is both a moral duty and, for me, a legal obligation. New works has been started on a new 2021-2030 strategy, work led by Elena Dalli, the European Commissioner responsible for equality. Is part of a consultation launched last autumn, and I have different visio with my colleagues, European Elena Dalli. The context you tell us with the health crisis affecting very much the persons with disabilities. And I think that new European strategy for persons with disability in a context of health crisis is to ensure that no one is left behind. Officially, disability policies are a national competence. Each country those developed its own measures. And there are a lot of different models. But I think that the difficulties that each country bring us closer and more every country all together. The health and economic crisis leads to questions ourselves as not to start again as before, but to create new levels and new ensuring a resilient and equality recovery. Europe must propose a framework and lead a dynamic to allow each country to progress. I will not tell you all the figures because I know that you know perfectly in Europe. But just tell me that we have to give the right to work for disabled people and the possibility of earning a living by doing a freely chosen job. Respect for the principle of equal opportunities, right to choose one's professional future without specific pre-advised circuit, and right to inclusion in a common law. Why the job is so important? Well, you know perfectly, for autonomy, for emancipation of especially women with disabilities. And I think that we have to focus on that. You asked me the role on Europe in raising awareness. I think that we have different policies, obligation with a quota, encouragement with sanctification and of the principle of non-discrimination. Between the two, no or few quotas and incentive measures without sanctifying the principle of non-discrimination. I think that we have to link both of them. Personally, I think that the obligation is not enough. Look at France, 33 years that we have to have 6%. Right now, we are only 3.9 for companies, around 6 for all the public employers. We must support the companies. If the managers have the key, we must absolutely work for them, with them. I think that there is find a new step to come. We really need to speak all together that the diversity of disability situation can be really, how do you say that, a tremplin? Maybe we will.
We all understand, we all understand.
Okay. A tremplin to change really the figures and to change also the way we look at all the capacity and people, like I say, autrement capable sometimes. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that the most big ideas that we must support in Europe is the supported employment. We must develop the supported employment. We must develop the notion of job coaching as we intend to express as supported employment. We must put two developments in supported employment. We put the common law at the heart with prescription by state agency, the regular one, not specific one. And we need a platform operation which requests really to increase the qualities of all the persons who advise for supported employment. We really have to deal at a European definition of what we call the supported employment. This is, I think, very strong, and we should work on this. Secondly, we must measure. We have to measure in a better way the increasing of employment for disabilities persons. I always say in France that we can only progress on what can be measured. And we must be more transparent for all the people on the level of employment, direct employment, but also supported employment, also training, per person in disabilities in training. So we must have common indicators, and we are not good for that. So we have to improve really common indicators, percentage of trainees, number of staff awareness campaigns, existence of disability reference in all the companies or in the different institutions. So all development must take place with the participation of people. I know that you are very aware of that, of people with disability themselves, thinking of themselves, for themselves, and nothing really should be decided about people with disabilities without their participation. They must be part of the dialogue and the process. Okay, so I think that we should establish a framework or an organization to enable us to learn from our practices to progress together. This will be the message to President Macron on the occasion of his future presidency of the Union. Disability is a major issue on his 5 years term, and that's why I am Secretary of State for Disabled Persons, directly linked to the Prime Minister in order to change all the places with a common law. That's why I wanted to
thank you for this very clear and strong message. What I picked up from you is no one left behind. We have to work with employers. We need strong legal frameworks. We have to further develop the approach and the access to supported employment methodologies. We have to measure and come to common standards and agreements, and we have to do this in close cooperation with the organizations representing persons with a disability. And that is exactly why I'm so happy and even proud that we have a strong representation of EDF also here with us today. But I see that you want to add to your message. One more question, if I may, in addition to that. What will be your first step, or what will you propose as the first step when you have the presidency of the European Union?
First of all, before just answering that, I would have that to tell you that we have a formidable event, which is the DIO Day. We have to promote the DIO Day because it's a European event, and the DIO Day has been very well identified this year because it was in the between of the European Week for Employment of Disability Persons. And I think that all together we have to promote this. The DIO Day is a real event on which we have the possibility of having the person with disability speaking and the employer speaking. And that's really this DIO Day, I think is
indeed
really,
it proved to be a very good concept already. Yeah, I agree with you.
So for the presidency of President Macron, I think that first of all, we have to do again what I have done on 2018, which is having all my colleagues of Europe all together, my colleagues in charge of disability persons all together, in order to promote what we can do together, which means in all the subjects: education, employment, mobility, accessibility, and citizenship, which is very important, all the rights of citizenship. And about employment, let's do a very simple things, is having an event specially dedicated to employment, but employment, I think only with 2 or 3 big figures, which mean but is a training, apprentissage, which is really for the young people in order to be qualified, which is the most important thing, qualification in order to achieve a job. And maybe why don't we focus on supported employment, which is something quite new for us in France, but can be, for example, with supported employments and employers coming in these events and saying stop to the discrimination. We have really special needs can be answered by special needs. So I think that it could be a great thing altogether.
Thank you very much, Madame Sophie Cluzel, for your contribution to this debate this afternoon. A very clear message. We wish you a lot of success in the preparation of the French presidency. And of course, I can tell you that we are all available, all the organizations that together organize this event are available to work with you on the ideas that you just launched. Just one little element maybe, let's make sure that now that Europe is investing so much in going digital and in becoming a more green economy, let's make sure that also these processes are inclusive and open towards persons with support needs and people with disabilities. Thank you very much. Time is flying, dear participants from across Europe. So we have to move now to our next speaker, and it's with pleasure that I introduce to you Mr. Stefan Trömmel, ILO Senior Disability Expert and Specialist. Stefan is working in the environment where employers and employees meet, where the networks meet each other. And Stefan, of course, is somebody who is active in this field since many, many years, also promoting the work of the Business and Disability Network. Stefan, what should Europe do and how can we make sure that it happens? You have the floor.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you for inviting me to your event, and congratulations to the lines that you have promoted, because I think especially in the current context, working together in these alliances is vital. And I like very much the terms that you've used introducing the webinar in terms of decent work, a very much an ILO term, and of course also because not every job is good enough. We need to look also at the quality of jobs, not only at jobs, but also the term of inclusive labor markets, very much a terminology that comes also from the UN Convention. It's Article 27. I don't need to go much into the current state of play. We all know this current state of play. You've described it. Statistics are obvious, is bad, and it has become worse. Although we not always have the adequate statistics, but it definitely has become worse and more concerning because of the COVID-19 context. And of course, it is particularly bad also in the context of women with disabilities, and certain subgroups of the disability community are even more affected by this. When we in the ILO speak about how to promote the employment of persons with disabilities, especially in the context of what we call waged employment, decent employment, so employment in the private sector or the public sector, we differentiate three areas on which we need to work in parallel. And very quickly speak about each of them. On one hand, we need to have disability confident employers. We need to ensure that people with disability have access to the skills that the labor market is demanding, and we need to have an environment that is conducive for all this to happen. If I look at the first one, disability confident employers, it's fair to say that we are doing right now much better than before. I mean, we have been, you and I and some others on the call have been in this area working for many years, and the level of commitment and knowledge that is now there within the private sector on the employment of persons with disabilities is unprecedented. Now we are really moving from the why, the business case, to how to do it. We have the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, we have the Valuable 500 campaign, and other interesting initiatives. So we're better off than ever before, but at the same time, we also still have challenges. We have challenges because when large companies or medium companies speak about diversity and inclusion, and there's a trend towards that, very often disability is not part of that. It's about race, about gender, LGBTI, all important issues, but disability is often forgotten. We still have a huge challenge with small and medium enterprises. No? I mean, I think in larger companies, still huge scope for improvement, but once a large company decides to become disability inclusive, they can deal with it internally and with a bit of support. But small and medium enterprises, even if committed, they need more support, and we don't always have the structures in place for that. And one important issue that we're starting now to address in the ILO, and of course there are many countries, and the French Secretary of State mentioned the employment quota in the public sector, but in many other countries, the public sector has not been leading by example in the context of employment of persons with disabilities. And we want now, as ILO, we want to look a bit more into that, and we are considering currently to promote some form of network of public sector employers, similar to the one that we have for the private sector. Now that's the first area. Second area is access to skills. We still need to make sure that people with disabilities have equal opportunities in accessing skills. We know that's about education, but it's also about the vocational training system delivering better apprenticeships. I like very much that idea also mentioned by the Secretary of State. The whole transition to school, whether it's from school training, whether it's from university, all that is not being done well. We launched last week, you might know, look at during the Zero Project Conference, we launched a report on promoting the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the digital economy. because as we all know, that it was already a trend which was there before, but of course, COVID-19 has just accelerated this digital transformation you've mentioned to that. And I think the big challenge we also all have, and you also as the Alliance, is really to ensure that people with disabilities benefit from this wave of digital jobs. And it's not granted, because we know there's a digital gap, not always with sufficient evidence, but we know that people with disabilities usually have a lower level of access to skills and digital tools. So we need to bridge that gap and really come then with targeted as well as mainstream interventions to make sure that people with disabilities have these digital skills that the labor market is demanding. And as you know, well, we did that report in collaboration with Fundación ONCE and with the EU-funded DHEP project. And also within our own discussions in the ILO, when we were speaking about last June, we had a big summit with heads of states, and we were looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the world of work. Digital transformation was the #1 word, as well as green jobs. And you've mentioned both of them. We really need to make sure that these increasing employment opportunities are really there, providing their fair share to persons with disabilities. That's the second element. The third element is this enabling environment. I think the pandemic has shown us that something we already knew, but I think it has reminded us that the current enabling environment is not enabling enough, and that we just need to do much better than we have. And that means issues around, it's about social protection, which still very often is not designed in a way that is adequately supportive to employment. We still don't always have adequate statistics. Legislation, yes, it's there because we have, of course, the European Union Directive, we have the UN Convention, of course, now. But still, you know, I mean, in many countries, employers and trade unions and disability organizations, even themselves, sometimes even don't fully understand, for instance, the concept of reasonable accommodation and workplace adjustment and how to deal with that. We don't have in many countries, and the Secretary of State of France has said it, we don't have supported employment services at the adequate level to really target those people with disabilities that probably have even higher problems to get into the labor market, like persons with intellectual disabilities, persons with social disabilities. No? So more needs to be done. We can do better on procurement. I mean, public procurement is still not used in the most creative way to promote employment. Not just in specialized companies, but really sort of in mainstream companies. For instance, giving companies extra points if they can show that they are disability inclusive companies. No? We're still struggling with stigma and stereotype. Let's be fair. It's not only in the employer community, but it's just in the general society, and especially in the current context. And we have seen how the pandemic has reminded us, and sometimes in terrible situations, how still our society sometimes perceives disability or person with disabilities of having a life of less value. No? And now, if you bring that to the employment context, it is just you still see this concept of why should we now bother about persons with disabilities if millions of others have lost their job? And I think we just need to challenge these perceptions, this whole idea of the last to get in and the first to get out. We need to challenge that, but we're still not there. No? It's a huge issue. I think, and my final point, and sorry for being so quick and telegraphic, but
no, it's okay. It's okay.
It's the issue of support services. I think we still need to have better support service for small and medium enterprises, for supported employment, as the French Secretary of State has said. But I think also it's interesting to look at, in some countries, you have a pretty good support system for a person who acquires the disability while he or she was contributing to the social security system. No? A whole system of support comes in because the organization that will need to pay a disability benefit to that person, unless the person gets back to the labor market, has a huge interest, there's an obvious return on investment to make individual case management, to really all undergo rehabilitation, good new training if the person requires to do a new job. We don't have that, very few exceptions, we never have that in place for a young person with a disability who is disabled from birth, disability before entering the labor market. And so we have a huge imbalance in many countries between the package of services that are available for somebody who happens to acquire disability at later stage while covered by Social Security versus a person who's just knocking on the door of the labor market. And I think we have a problem there. And the European Union as a union of developed countries, I think it's not correct to continue to have this imbalance of services between these different types of situations. look, I leave.
Thank you, Stefan.
I don't know whether you have time or not for questions. I leave that to you.
I have one question, and then I will maybe turn to the chat and see whether somebody wants to ask a question. But while people think about that, Stefan, we have brought together in our ILMA, we call it ILMA, that is the platform with ESPD, EUSE, Workability, EDF, NC, and EPR. What should we do as networks, as organizations to facilitate these processes? You know how the disability community bubble works, so to say. You know how multinationals think and work. You know how international organizations work. What would be your recommendation? What should we do?
Well, to be a bit selfish, I would suggest that you have, for instance, have a look at the publication we just launched, because I think it gives recommendations to all stakeholders. And I think it's also a reminder that we all have a role to play, from disability organizations, of course, but also public authorities, the corporate sector, the digital industry, trade unions. So social dialogue is very important. I think it's more needed than ever, is this going out of our own bubble and reaching out. I mean, you've said it in your question to the Secretary of State. We need to infiltrate the EU recovery process. I mean, if the EU recovery process is digital and green, but not inclusive, not disability inclusive, I mean, sorry, then I mean, we should go home and start crying, because we would have failed, you know. And I think this is only achieved through coordinated work. That's why I think it's so important to have your alliance. But definitely, of course, the work at the end of the day is the work happening both at Brussels, but also, as you know, at country level, and in a very coordinated way. I think we have here really have a litmus test for our capacity to see whether all this progress that we have made, which we have made, we have a convention, we have, I mean, you will have now the new disability strategy, but I think it's really these mainstream initiatives like this one, and I don't think we will have any similar initiative in the near future. If we are not able to infiltrate adequately that one, it just shows us that we're still far away from where we should be.
Yeah. Thank you, Stefan, for these very clear messages. In the meantime, those that follow the conversation in the chat box might have seen that Thomas Bignell has put the ILO Disability and Business Report in the chat box, so you can find the link there, dear participants. Maybe we can also put the joint declaration that we as organizations have developed, so maybe somebody of the SPD team can put that as well. Stefan, the recovery plan, you touched upon it. Do you see hooks where we should focus our energy on?
Look, I think it's the whole digital part is vital. I mean, there is an investment now in reskilling, in upskilling, in initial skilling. We need to be part of that. People with disabilities will be in different situations, so we need to cover all that. And I think it's the other big thing is of course also climate change. We have, as you know, last year, in fact, in 2020, we were planning to focus on the climate change, what we call just transition in the ILO context, not the jobs that will be created from the move from a carbon intensive to a low carbon economy. And then, of course, when COVID-19 came, we said, no, we need to zoom in much more still on digital economy. That's a much bigger piece. But at the same time, we need to look at climate change. There's this, the climate change discussions, which will happen this year. They were cancelled last year. They will happen in November in Glasgow. We need to infiltrate those discussions from all angles, because climate change is affecting people with disabilities from all points of view, but also from an employment perspective. There are jobs already being created, and not enough of those jobs are going to persons with disabilities. And that requires working both on the skills part, but also in terms of saying, okay, now if there are public investments that will support the establishment or the growth of companies in that context, we need to include in those, that's where the procurement angle comes also in. I think we need to include disability in the support that governments will be providing to this move from a more economy.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Stefan, clear and to the point as always. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. And of course, feel free to stay and to maybe also help us in asking the right questions to our colleagues, to the representatives of the European Parliament, the representative of the Portuguese presidency, and the director of DG Employment, Katarina Ivankovic, who will have a debate later on. But maybe first, dear participants, this joint statement I talked about already 2 or 3 times. Let's dive in, and Laura Jones, Secretary General of EPR, will introduce that joint statement to all of us. Laura, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Luke. So indeed, I will highlight some of the main messages from our joint message, and then colleagues will go into more detail about some of the recommendations and what we're calling on the EU to do, what we want them to do and to take action. So our joint message outlines our vision of an inclusive labour market and decent work. You can read the full version online, and I also encourage you to read the recommendations of the Vienna Declaration, which the ILMA Alliance also supports. So obviously, for an inclusive labour market, it's not enough to only address the labour market itself. We need an inclusive society and an enabling environment, as Stefan mentioned earlier. We need access to quality, inclusive education and training, which is itself, as Stefan also said, the access to skills, setting people up to be able to access the labour market. And we believe that all human beings can engage in economic activity with the right kind of personalised support, both for the individual and also for the employer. And no two people are the same. So we really emphasise the need for tailor-made support, and also to take into account possible double discrimination and how to address that, such as for women with a disability. And disability does entail extra costs sometimes, and it must be made sure that these costs are met, both for the individual and again, the employer. And there are many other supporting measures that must be in place as well to ensure access to work, such as transport, to ensure mobility. And then we would also like to see a shift from just thinking that it's okay that somebody gets a job and maintains it, towards supporting career development and career progression. And as also has been mentioned before, on a more macro level, we do need more study and the elimination of known and perhaps even more hidden poverty traps in the social protection systems that can hinder access to work. And in the transition to a more digital society and a more green society, we need to be identifying opportunities and make sure that any initiatives take into account disadvantaged workers and people with disabilities, so that those initiatives and actions ensure that all people are included in this new reality. And in times of economic instability, such as has been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, all the policy decisions and stimulus measures must take into account what impact might be and how these groups might need to be supported, so that no workers are disproportionately impacted or left behind indeed. I'm now going to invite colleagues from the other ILMA members to explain in more detail what we believe the EU's role is, and we've grouped some of our demands together. I'm first going to hand over to Patricia Bussi, who will talk.
Yes, thank you very much, dear colleague. And as a representative of a social enterprise operating for the professional and social integration of people in needs, called also Work Integration Social Enterprise, and as part of the social economy, I can underline the role of this sector in being innovative and also with a great adaptability, as we have seen during this COVID crisis period, in which many of them that change field of activity or change also the type of production in order to react to the different problems caused by COVID, were able and are able to continue this work of reintegration of people in need. And they do this and they promote so the passage of these people in need to the mainstream market. But in order to improve this innovation in building inclusive labor market and also boost the generation of opportunity in the mainstream market, we think that we need the right policies, good in as active labor policies, and we need also new funds. We think that this should be reflected in the future EU Action Plan on Social Economy that will be published at the end of the year. And we also think, as already said by our colleague before, that within the recovery plans, social economy and proximity have been recognized as one of the 14 industrial sectors So their role in integrating people in need is recognized also in this framework. And we need so to boost this type of policy and to boost the need of funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm now going to hand over to Karen Barson, who will talk more about employers.
Yeah, we know that most people with a disability in paid jobs are working in small and medium-sized enterprises. These SMEs, they often don't have experienced HR capacity. Their priority is making a profitable business, and in order to do so, they need employees whose skills match their needs. But these employers often have a hard time finding the right employees, and they don't have enough access to information about regulations, support measures available in their region, country. They often don't know about which quality services are in place to support them in matching the right people into sustainable jobs in their company. Supported employment services can help them to do so. And we find these companies are open to suggestions and support, but they need good quality information and reassurance. They need services to hold their hand through the recruitment and retention process if they are to have confidence. And now with COVID-19, that has had a disproportionate impact on the health and the well-being of disabled workers and job seekers. So as we recover from the pandemic, we must make it easier for these companies to retain their existing workforce and make sure that we offer high quality support services when new employees are being recruited. So we need to address the barriers, promote consistency and raise awareness of this support. And the European Union is best placed to gather a panoramic overview on how national policies and legislation have implemented Article 27 of the UN CRPD. So it is in a strong position to identify what works best in the different countries and to promote this learning. I think it is a bit like what Madame Cluzel also said. So I hope they will do what we hope they will do. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Now I hand over to Hayden Hammersley.
Hello, everyone. So we at ILMA, we're calling on the EU to stimulate the growth of knowledge, research and data, all aimed at enhancing employment options. So this entails many things. It means first and foremost, having clear and disaggregated data on the employment rates of persons with disabilities. This is very important so we can understand where the barriers lie and for which people in particular these barriers are present. It also means research looking into good practices of inclusion in the labour market and building knowledge about how we can adopt working practices to eliminate some of the barriers persons with disabilities face. It can also mean investment in new forms of assistive technology that can support persons with disabilities in being able to work to their full potential. And here the EU has the power of the Horizon Europe budget, which could definitely go a very long way in achieving this. Thank you very much, Laura. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Hayden. Now I hand over to John Ander Arzalas Galparsoro.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Okay, I'm going to point a little words about the social protection design, as Mr. Stefan Trommel pointed before, because from the perspective of this system, we believe that re-engineering work is necessary to guarantee a good protection suitable to the present time. A public-private collaboration between all the agents involved in labor activation and complementary social services is absolutely necessary. The efficiency of the resources deployed, as well as the effectiveness of the systems and services in obtaining the final result in inclusion, are becoming an increasing priority. Public-private collaboration is the key for both efficiency and effectiveness, and the Commission must ensure compliance with these principles in the member states. more resources, more efficiency, more effectiveness in specialized services for vocational guidance, training for employment, development of itineraries that ensure a job at the end, the guarantee of a minimum income for a decent life. All these four aspects are crucial if we want to guarantee a greater share of inclusion of people with disabilities. And above all, we must not leave anyone behind. I loved the words of Madame Sophie Cluzel, and all future policies and services must guarantee equal opportunities to all people with disabilities, including those with more support needs and also those who are initially farthest from employment. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, John. And now to Thomas Bignall.
Thank you, Laura, and everyone else. What's also needed and hasn't been discussed yet is really how we can support, let's say, the organizations who help people with disabilities onto the labor market, either through employment support or through training or other activities. And how can we do that? First of all, we need sustainable funding. Generally, employment organizations in our field are underfunded. In particular in the field of supported employment, for example, and we need to make sure that measures that these types of organizations are funded sufficiently. The European Social Fund, for example, often helps these organizations, say, more the short term, but after the funding comes out from the European level, what happens to these very good innovative projects. We also need stable legal frameworks. The European Union provides good frameworks on two of these areas. Public procurement has already been mentioned. Public procurement represents 14% of the EU GDP. So there's lots of opportunities for boosting the employment of persons with disabilities through public procurement. The EU legislation allows for it, even encourages it, but it's very too often used. State aid, also extremely useful, again legislated at EU level, but again often underused at national level. And thirdly, we need the structural involvement of all stakeholders at both EU and national level. Co-production is very important, but co-production means all partners at the table. It means the authorities, it means persons with disabilities, it means employers, it also means the support services, who also need to be at the table, be it at local level, on the ground when we're trying to find jobs for people with disabilities. It also means at European Union level when we're doing legislation on the employment of people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your concise explanations. And there are many policy initiatives that offer opportunities to work towards our recommendations, to work towards an inclusive labour market. So we would really call on the EU to take these opportunities, and we would be happy to work with representatives from the Commission, from the Parliament, in order to build into these actions and initiatives in the field of sustainable funding, gathering and highlighting good practices, data, research and analysis of systems and services. And we will also continue to work with our members and also with employers to develop new approaches and business models, promoting co-production and tailor-made responses. So I thank you very much for listening to our recommendations. And now we'll hand over to Luc Queneau, who will lead the next section.
Thank you, Laura. We have a very strong panel to discuss some of the topics that we already heard. We have two representatives of the European Parliament, two members of the Parliament, Ms. Langensiepen and Mr. Gusmao. We have a representative of the presidency of the EU at this moment, which is Portugal. It's Mr. Bruno Ribeiro Barata. And we also have Katerina Ivankovic, who is the director of DG Employment. So we really have some very important people around the table or around the Zoom table in this conference. We prepared this panel with some questions that are coming from the different organizations also. So I will ask them to bring their question in. The main question of this part is how? How will we realize it? I was so pleased with the words of Madame Cluzel, leave no one behind. We have the moral and the legislative obligation to do things. People with a disability should be part of, employers should be involved. But the main question of this part of our webinar is how will we do that, and what can be the role of the European Union in that movement? So I will start with the question of ENSI brought by Patricia Bussi, and I will ask then shortly that one of the members of the panel gives a first answer and some discussion around it. I would like to ask the people from the panel to be short and sharp in their answers, because we don't have the whole afternoon or the evening, and we still have a lot of questions to deal with. But first of all, Patricia, then, what is the question that you would like to ask to these panel people?
Yes, so my question will really concern the use of the money available within the recovery and within also the future budget. How EU institution will monitor the use of this fund, how you will work in this direction. Thank you. Thank you, Luc.
Ms. Lange-Siepen, can you answer it? How will EU monitor the good spending of the funds?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, first of all, the funds we have voted for, or we decided on, goes through the so-called European Court of Auditors. So how and where could we bring the money? But let's do it other way around. How can we avoid that money goes into the wrong direction, like institutions who are against the Euro and CRPD? And I remember that I have asked that question to Helena Dalli when she presented herself in the Ample Committee, and I asked her, can you agree or guarantee that the money goes into the right direction, not in the wrong direction? And she promised me she will keep an eye, and she promised me that the Commission will ensure that the money will not go into projects, institutions who are against the Euro and CRPD. So, and that is another important thing. From the other side is how can we invest into education, inclusive education, and of course we have to keep an eye on in our member states. So what is the country XYZ is doing exactly with ESF money or EFRE or FEAD fund, just to name a few funds, to have in our national parliaments, in our local parliaments, to have an eye on and to re-inform us if goes something wrong. So the monitoring on all levels is super important.
Okay, maybe to the other side of the table, not really the political side, but the director who has to decide and to follow up, Ms. Ivankovic, what could be your answer or your how on the spending of the money?
Well, yes, thank you very much. And I believe when it comes to the money, we are all on the same side. And it is very important to have in mind. And I believe we all want as much as possible financing for the social policy first, and also as much as possible financing for inclusion of persons with a disability in community. And when I say in community, and I mean from early childcare and education, all throughout the education, into the open labor market, and then securing the decent living and decent working conditions as well. So now from these words, very political, if I may say so, to come to something more concrete. Now, actually, as we speak, we are negotiating the partnership agreements. We are negotiating the national reform and resilience programs, and we are negotiating operational programs for future ESF plus and DRDF. And it is a good moment. It is a good moment that the strategy will be adopted soon. That's the first point that I want to highlight, because it will be very visible in which direction do we at the level of the EU, I would dare to say, not only EC but EU institutions, because you will see once the strategy is out, we took on board all the relevant elements and all the relevant aspects that have been discussed in the past, even more than a year. And from the European Parliament, from the Committee of Regions, from the ECOSOC, from all the stakeholders consultations, and it's very visible and prominent in the strategy. So that is first element, and it will be also important how we see that the lives of the persons with disability should change in the next 10 years, starting from the accessibility as enabler of the rights, then moving and residing freely, and then securing the decent quality of life and living independently. And within those chapters, there is a number of actions where we really call upon the member states to reflect in their not only national strategies, but also in the financing programs. We definitely, and you noted that quite well, and thank you all who were supporting the whole process, have an enabling condition, which is UNCRPD for the use of the EU funding. We had many discussions, and last week we had a meeting with the managing authorities on the enabling conditions and the thematic concentration. So this is something very important to have in mind, and this is going to be closely followed from the side of the shared management. Then also we must not forget the European semester. Just in 2020, in all country reports, we have addressed disability, and we have really, in some country reports, we really went in depth with our analysis. And if you look only 2020, 18 member states in the country-specific recommendations in this way or the other have a mentioning of the persons with disabilities, and mostly what is even more important, the concerns on the employment opportunities of persons with disabilities. So when you put all of this together, although sometimes they seem like divided processes, but they're really all it's one process. The use of EU funding definitely, and also the European semester. Just to reflect on Kathleen's reflection on the financing the institutions, that is something that we really pay close attention. We work closely with the colleagues dealing with Recovery and Resilience Fund to avoid that not only in the ESF Plus we are safe, but we want to be safe in the RRF as well, which is extremely important and powerful moment, if I may say so. And what we instruct all of those dealing with the negotiations, and also the message that we pass to the member states, is that every investment in the infrastructure has to also be followed by the investments in the community-based activities. And by that, I don't want to say that we would be approving financing of the big institutions, but we will carefully examine on the case-by-case basis if you want to finance, let's say, the nursing home, or if you want to finance some kind of any other kind of residential institution. All the other services needs to be fully in place. All the community, so in-home services, all the workforce needed for addressing services in the community needs to be in place. And people, before everything, have to have the possibility to choose and the right to choose. And for us, this is the core of any community service. And sorry if I was too long. I tried to be short as possible, but there are just simply too many things I would like to share.
Just one closing question, and a very short one. Is the plus in ESF Plus the plus of inclusion?
Well, the plus is of trying to put all of it together, but inclusion is definitely the big player in the ESF Plus.
Thank you.
But not only in the ESF Plus, in the whole other activities, you will see not only the minimum income, the European Child Guarantee, and many others to come.
Yeah, thank you. We will come back. I would like to go to a second question, and that's a question mainly for Mr. Gusmao and Mr. Vibiero Barata. A question from Karen Warson from EUSE.
Yeah, we would like to ask you, what role do you see for the European Union in supporting employers, particularly SMEs, in recruiting and retaining disabled workers?
Yes, Mr. Gusmao, what could be the role of the
Thank
EU
you.
towards employers?
The issue of employment is a cornerstone for the entire independent life paradigm. And what I think is most needed is that we get centers for independent life or other kinds of social support instruments to provide services to persons with disabilities in finding a job, getting qualifications, getting training, but also supporting small and medium enterprises as to how they can prepare to have people with disabilities working at their workplaces. And this, in many cases, can be related only with prejudices that we know still exist amongst our employers, because they're a part of the population, so they reproduce the general prejudices in society. But I think that this has to mean that we need much more significant funding for this kind of policy for disability. And I think I would like to weigh in on the first question related to this, which is the fact, as some of you may know, we have conducted a study on the use of European funding going into policies for people with disabilities. And the findings of that study, which have already been confirmed what it was the impression of Catherine, that a lot of funding is going into the old way of dealing with the issues of disability and not to community-based services. And this, of course, is a feedback loop that also perpetuates the model in which having people with disability working, having professional careers, just doesn't exist. And another very disturbing aspect of that study is that it shows that in many instances where the misuse of European funding was the object of formal complaints with the European institutions, that those complaints didn't really produce results in terms of what is standard practice when a member state doesn't use funding adequately. And one thing that I would like to point out is, as it was mentioned, we're going to have the RRF, we're going to have the ESF Plus. And one of the, I was a rapporteur in both of these files, and on the ESF Plus, we could see how difficult it is to earmark European funding for social priorities. It was really tough getting even very mainstream priorities like the child guarantee, like the support for the most deprived, to get earmarks. Binding earmarks for member states is really tough. And we don't have that for people with disabilities. What we have is some general priorities. And this is a problem because it's difficult to impose criteria for the use of funding going into policies for disability if we don't have specific earmarks for that funding. And it's even more difficult when we have approved the RRF. Member states are going to start presenting their recovery plans, and we don't have a disability strategy in place that can be used to evaluate those recovery plans in light of the priorities that were established by the strategy. So we need to have a strategy in place so that we can evaluate recovery plans and see what member states are planning to do in terms of policy for disability. And then we need to have effective monitoring of the way those funds are going to be used. If we're going to keep channeling them into a model that is still very much the mainstream in many countries, like in Portugal, we're just giving some important steps. We now have centers for independent life. We have a law on independent life. So we've made some progress, but we're still miles away from having all of our disability policy centered in that concept. And we need to make sure the European funding goes that way.
Okay. Mr. Ribeiro Burata, you're also from the beautiful Portugal. Your country has been very important at this moment as a president. What is your specific emphasis or action that you do for supporting employers?
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank for the invitation and express my satisfaction to discuss this fundamental priority with my panel colleagues and of course with you. My first word, and it's important to stress about the Portuguese presidency of the Council. The Portuguese presidency choose as one of main priorities to give concrete meaning to the European Pillar of Social Rights. And we put the social at the heart of the Portuguese presidency. And this is very important to stress. And for doing so, we will organize the Social Summit of Porto in May to give a political incentive to the implementation of the European Pillar. The European Pillar and the 20 fundamental principles, of course, some of them are more related with the inclusion, but in my opinion, all the fundamental principles of the pillar are connected and cover the persons with disabilities, because we are talking about equal opportunities and access to labor market is our main issue of this talk, fair working conditions. So it's very important also to the persons with disabilities and social protection and inclusion. And you say what the Portuguese presidency will do for the persons with disabilities in concrete. But in the chapeau is the European pillar. In concrete, the Portuguese presidency will organize and to mark the political agenda, because our role as presidents is mark the political agenda, and for that we will organize a high-level conference of 2 days on 19th and 20th of April. Maybe could be presential, we never know. Cross fingers for that. And we also intend to present a council conclusions about persons with disabilities, inspired in the Commission Disability Rights Strategy 2021-2030. The council conclusions we are preparing are invite to the member states to develop and implement the strategy, because you know the Commission can go to launch the new strategy in the beginning of March, but it don't have obligation for the member states, and our role is make council conclusions to take on board all member states to implement the council conclusions. And I think is very important these council conclusions we pretend adopt in the EBSCO Council in June, and it's our main goal in this topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question, and I will come back to you, Mr. Barata, from Jon Ander Galparasso, who has also a question for the panel.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the question is, how do you think you should work with member states to guarantee equal opportunities also for those people with disabilities with more support needs and really not leave anyone behind? Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Ribeiro Barata, is there something in your plans that could really help the people with the more support needs?
You know, we have learned a lot with the strategy 2011-2020, and that ends now, and we have a report about the results, and the results are very good in my opinion. If you see, only 9% of the goals are not achieved, and it's an enormous achievement.
Mm-hmm.
In that 10 years, if you look back, of course, while there it's still a lot to do, but the strategy have enormous impact in European rules and policies, and also in member states. We have to take member states to this reality and for these problems, and make things happen is our objective. And I think with the new strategy and with this political agenda we have, we think can put in the top of the agenda of member states the persons with disabilities, because if you see also in the report of the strategy, you can see in the stakeholders consultation, because the report go to the stakeholders consultations, and also for in the member states to have the two visions, and you can see the stakeholders have reported a significant conquest. The strategy actions in the area of employment have been practical, and it's important. It's an unfinished walk, but we are taking these steps and progress, and I think with the new strategy it's a very huge step to our goals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ivankovic, maybe a little bit the same question from your side. Sometimes I hear from colleagues, and I see also that the way the European Social Fund is giving money and supporting actions is going a lot more to commercial sides, tendering, result driven, and there is some cherry picking in the realization of these projects to reach the results. But then the question comes back, what will Europe do? What will DG Employment do to reach these people with really more support needs?
Thank you very much. Look, it's a really good question, and let me try to address it. I have to say what has been also quite visible in, let's say, last not only a couple of years, I would dare to say in a couple of decades, was really to try to see which are the biggest challenges for the persons with disabilities and then trying to address it. So what happened, sometimes we did not, and when I say we, I mean all of us, the member states and the Commission and the Parliament and everybody dealing with, we each maybe saw our little niche and managed to somehow overlook the whole picture. When it comes to the employment, you are absolutely right, as there are those who are far from the labor market, the open labor market, and then there are those who are even further from the open labor market. Mm-hmm. And we do believe that the reply lies in really addressing, I would dare to say, the labor market outcomes for the persons with disabilities. And when I say packaging, I want to say that there is activities that needs to be put in place and could not be just overcome or stepped over, but all of them needs to be there. So I will tell you exactly what do I mean when we reflect on those.
Maybe
when I furthest from the labor market. Yeah. So we definitely need to see which is the best way to engage, even activate the persons with disabilities. Is this the public employment services? We know that we have a good network of public employment services, and is there a role for their reform in the light that we have seen two ways to deal with it? So one was like to having a specialized units for persons with disabilities, or to having specialized counselors for persons with disabilities. Whatever we choose, whichever element would we find, the role of those who are in between of persons without employment and the open markets should be put in place. Then we definitely have to come back to the accessibility and to securing the reasonable accommodation. I believe, you know, that we have been pushing a lot in last 2 years. We had a huge campaign on inclusion of, on anti-discrimination in general, but then a reasonable accommodation and inclusion of persons with disabilities, and it showed that there is a huge potential, but still a lot needs to be done. Then we still need to combat stereotypes. I believe this is something that must not forget. Yeah. And also, sorry, I will.
Yeah, there's one question that comes up, and also in the panel, in the chat. Okay, this is true. All our countries signed UN Nation CRPD, and it's coming into national law, but there is no strong link from Europe to force our national governments to really engage to this CRPD. Should Europe do more to force our national governments to really make the United Nations CRPD working?
Look, you are now asking me a very tricky question, if I may say, because
and it's recorded.
Yes, because we all signed, and we all are state parties to the UN CRPD.
Yeah,
it means when we say the new EU strategy on the rights of the persons with disabilities will take on board all the articles of UN CRPD, this means that all of our member states, because all of them are state parties to the convention, have to do the same. If pointing to the fact that which other elements needs to be in place, we are all implementing the UN CRPD. Who is supposed to interpret the convention? That's the UN committee. It's not the EU, and it's not DG Employment or our colleagues in the EP. We have to follow up closely, and we have to make sure that all the efforts that we have within our competencies, and we are very much, I believe, aware which competencies are at the EU level and which competencies are at the member states level. And we know very much where we can interfere. I believe this has been extremely visible in the area of accessibility, but we know that there are areas where we have less or none competencies, and there we rely on what the member states will do. What we can do is to put even higher at the political agenda, and I believe by having a commissioner for equality who is very active and very eager and very ready to support the disability angle in all its senses, putting it higher on the agenda of the EU institutions. And I believe we have a very solid commitment from all EU institutions that want to address the UNCRPD. And also, I can't disclose all the elements of the strategy. There will be plenty of time from March onwards. We are trying to put some elements in order also to address it within the member states. Maybe just one thing that I believe all of us have to have in mind. For example, very often we get a comment from the member states that accessibility requirements to the built environment are EU invention. It's Article 19. So we all have to look into ourselves and really truly see what UNCRPD is about and how to implement, first of all, UNCRPD. And then later on, EU strategy will help, definitely will help. But the key really lies within those who are implementing actions in the field.
Thank you. Strong message also. I will go to another topic and I will come back to the members of the European Parliament. Hayden Hammersley has a question for you.
Yes, so my question is again on data collection and research. The question is, how do you think the EU can improve data collection on the employment of persons with disabilities and enhance research into how to foster greater employment opportunities in the open labor market? So that's my question.
Ms. Langen-Siepen, I think you already mentioned this topic in the first intervention, but here is a very concrete question. How can EU do that?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. The lack of data is a problem, and that was one point I've mentioned in my report. I've wrote a report on that issue, persons with disabilities and situation in the labor market. We will hopefully, that report will adopt it in March in plenary. That we need more data, and one basis can be found at Eurostat, where we demand the collection of comparable disability-related data. So that can be a partner, and that we states. An example is normally we only have the data how many people with disabilities we have. For example, in Germany we counted by the disability card, for example. So it's not 100% kind of a data collection, but we have. So Eurostat can be a partner who give us data including on employment, on gender, age, types of disabilities, race, sexual orientation, for example, or moreover to process, we need to set, of course, measurable targets. So how many persons with disabilities are in employed in public sector, for example. That's what I did when I worked in the local parliament, and I asked my administration or the commission, so how many persons work with disabilities working in our city, in our public sector, for example.
Ms. Langen-Siepen, one of the issues maybe is that all of the countries has their own standards and measures about what they and how they measure. Could the European Union play a role in standardizing it through Europe?
Yeah, I agree.
For example, even about employment rates, we often think that we speak about the same things, but when we look at the real data in a country, these are different.
Yeah.
Could and should maybe Europe play a role in making it more a European standardization measuring?
Yes, to keep it short and strong, yes. We should raise our voices, and I put all my hope into the upcoming strategy. So we ask in our strategy and our resolution to that strategy, remember last year adopted in June in the plenary, huge majority, that we ask for the data, or to solve the data issue in the upcoming strategy. We need a harmonization of persons with disabilities, or what means a person with disabilities, harmonization of that. And what we ask from the Parliament side, what we ask very strongly, and to push the Commission to go for it in the strategy, and of course in our report. So we have two blocks where we ask for it.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe a last question from the group. And Thomas, Thomas Bignal, you had a question prepared, but you also have a question about the social economy action plan. So maybe Thomas, you can go to that field.
Great, thank you very much, Luke. We had a question on the recovery plans, but I think we've discussed that quite in depth now. The Commission is planning to launch an action plan on the social economy towards the end of this year. We all know that the social economy is an important employer or persons with disabilities, as well as in supporting people with disabilities onto the labour market. How can we make sure that this issue is high up on the agenda of the social economy action plan?
Yeah, maybe Mr. Gusmao, what's the place of social economy in this field of inclusion?
Yes, thank you. I think we the social economy has been the main driver for employment of people with disabilities, and I think what we have to discuss is how we get social economy to be more viable in different economic sectors. I mean, we have some good examples, but what I feel is that sometimes the only real incentive is the fact that some of these institutions are not looking for the same economic objectives that, for instance, mainstream companies. And I think that one way to have, well, I would actually call it an expression that the Commission really likes, a level playing field, would be to start establishing social and binding rules for the entire economy. And this links with the issue that was discussed previously on the gathering of information. For instance, in my country, we have the disability certificate, but it's used mainly to access social allowances or to access early retirement. But I think, especially if we have had an harmonized system for this kind, I'm not going to go into the debates on how to measure disability, which is a complicated one. But if we had an harmonized system, or even with the national systems existing, we could create rules on quotas for employment, both in public, private, and third sector institutions. And I think that this could go a long way into dismantling the prejudices around employment of people with disabilities. So I think that we need tax and public policy supports for the social economy, but I wouldn't pigeonhole the policy for employment of people with disabilities in the social economy, because I really think that risk exists. I mean, I think we need to have binding rules for public institutions, for private companies, especially medium and large companies that can and should be employing people with disabilities. And I see no reason why we shouldn't have laws on that, making it mandatory.
Mr. Ribeiro Barata, what do you think? Do we need social economy, or can the general economy be the future for all people with disabilities?
Thank you for the question. It's very important, the issue you put in the table, because our presidency was, as said before, we have the pillar and the social summit at the heart of the presidency, but it's also very important the social economy for our presidency, and we want to prioritize this topic during our presidency. And you know, the European plan for the social economy, as announced, to be present at the end of the year, I suppose November or December. And to that happen, our presidency will give the kickoff to the discussion of the action plan for social economy, and will organize a conference about the social economy at 29th of March. And we have the aim of signing a declaration supporting the presentation of a European action plan. It's a kickoff to discussion and also to declaration the support. It will be a high-level conference. And let me tell you that at the same time, in 2021, Portugal will share the monitoring committee of Luxembourg Declaration. And the handover from the Spanish government to the Portuguese government was been in December, and now we'll put together the presidency of the committee and the social economy in our presidency at the top of our agenda. It's very important. One more question, and I think the reports, sometimes people forget the reports and only think in present and future. But to understand the future is very important to study the past. And for that, we in next Friday, 5 of March, the Commission in Social Question Working Party, I will share this meeting, will be present the report of the impact of 2011 Commission Social Business Initiative. It's a very important report to design the action plan, to analyze and see what the way and what the shape we want to give to the new action plan. It's very important this moment to study the report, to kick off the action plan, to launch the debate. And it's, of course, we don't have social policies without social economy, and count with us to trigger a first discussion with the member states on this topic. Thank you.
Okay. I see the time is running very fast. There is one question from Mr. Rodolfo Catani. Maybe we just take this question before we go to the next step. Mr. Rodolfo Catani, do you have a short question to end the panel with?
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to check because I have to intervene at the end. And I was checking if it's working. So there is no question at the moment. No. Thank you very much.
It's okay, Rodolfo. We hear you. We hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Then I will come with the last question to the 4 members of this panel in the 6 minutes that we still have. Our panel was about how can Europe contribute. So I will ask you a very personal and direct question to all of you. What will you do? What will be your contribution to a more inclusive labor market in the next months? Maybe I start with Ms. Langensiepen again. What will you do? One action, one sentence. What will you do? Where will you contribute to a more inclusive labor market from your position?
I hope that my report will be adopted next month, and then I will take it in other member states, and I'm looking forward for the discussion if it comes to how can we say phase out the shuttered workshops.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Guzmão, what will you do to realize a more inclusive labor market from your position in the coming months?
Well, from my position institutionally, the only report that I have that is discussing that issue is the annual growth survey, where we're having a debate, which I think is a very crucial one, on the kinds of priorities that go into the European semester. And as you know, we've been having that debate in the Econ Committee, very heated debate, because getting all kinds of social indicators into the European semester process is not as popular as you might think. And of course, this is reflected in all the reports that we've been discussing every time we have a European semester report. And that has meant that we cannot get a semester report approved in the Econ Committee, where I'm a member. We can in the EMPL Committee, where I'm also a member, but sometimes with some sketchy formulations. But I think that we will be able to get an EMPL report on the semester, including the Parliament's position to have social indicators in the European semester, and the disability policies will be in that framework.
Thank you. Mr. Ribeiro Barata, what can you do in the coming months to realize a more inclusive labor market? One action, one sentence.
I have enumerated a lot of projects about the Portuguese presidency in the social issues is our flagship, and of course, count with me. I will put my all energies and all my strengths to have this topic in the top of political agendas.
Yes, thank you. And Ms. Ivankovic, what is one action, one specific topic you will deal with in the next months to realize a more inclusive labor market?
Well, I have 3 important topics that I will finalize in the next 3 months, let's say. First, I need to make sure that all the elements relevant to the disability strategy are there, and that new strategy doesn't get watered down, as we like to say. And this is my first objective. And there is a big element and a very important element for the labor market inclusion of the persons with disabilities. Then I have to make sure that, where inclusion starts at early age, I have to make sure that children with disability have the place in the European Child Guarantee. starting from inclusion in the early childcare education, then the mainstream education, and also in respect to health and nutrition and the decent housing. So this is second big task I have in front of myself. And the third, maybe not that relevant, but very important, is also that we want to make sure that in the new disability platform, that, or not disability, the homelessness platform, or the platform on eradication of the homelessness, we pay attention to children and youth as really the most sensitive groups of all homeless persons. And this is something that I will also pay close eye that it doesn't get lost in translation. So I guess I'm very lucky.
Yeah, and we are lucky with this panel. Thank you all. I just want to say that we count on you, and we really hope that you will help us to realize the things that we are working with. So we count on you, and we will be there for you. If you need us, you can call us. So I giving back the word now to Luc Selderlo for the next step of this meeting.
Thank you very much, Luc, and thank you for this very interesting, fascinating debate with such an excellent panel. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, it is important to focus our policy actions and to discuss and to debate, but it is also important to celebrate success. And that is what we would like to do now together with you. We want to celebrate now the Employment for All Awards. We had planned to hand out these awards in May, but due to a certain virus, this was not possible. So let's now celebrate the Employment for All Awards. Music, please. Fabrizio, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Luc. It is really with great pleasure that I'm going to introduce the 4th edition of the SPD Employment for All Award. Nowadays, it is really important to find out valid and concrete employment practices in favor of persons with disabilities, where the real key word, it has been already said, is work with dignity. Employment for All is an award that recognizes promising practices in employment for persons with disabilities. We also celebrate organizations and individuals that ensure those persons to take their rightful place in the labor market. The call for awards and the selection took place last year during the SPD Paris conference organized by SPD, LADAPT, and Desk2 project. Practices were evaluated by a group of experts, and their criteria is contribution to the full implementation of Article 27 of the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The awards are divided into 2 categories: service providers and businesses employers. So now it's time to know and to welcome the winners. I am pleased to invite Mrs. Katrin Langenschiepen to award our winner in the category of service providers. Katrin, the floor is yours.
Katrin, you're muted.
Yeah, maybe she's muted.
Now we can hear you, Katrin.
You can hear me.
That's it. Please.
Yeah, thank you for the floor, dear members of the Inclusive Labour Market Alliance, dear participants of this webinar, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me here today and that we could discuss. As you may know, about 12 months ago, I was lucky to be given an initiative report in my role as member of the Ample Committee that was to look at the Equal Treatment in Employment and Occupation Directive, but with a specific focus on applying the UNCRPD. I'm grateful to have you here and the winner, and yeah, I'm super happy to congratulate you as the winner here for that award, maybe to keep it very, very short. And I'm super pleased to be here with you and to congratulate you. Thank you.
Okay, so do you want to announce? So after this first part, we go to the second, and I invite Mr. Jose Guzmão to announce the second winner from businesses and employers. Please. Yeah, the floor is yours, Mrs. Guzmão.
Thank you. I would also like to thank this invitation, because I think there are few things as transformative as good examples. So I think these kinds of initiatives can be very important to show what can be done. And actually it relates with something that I had already said in the previous panel. And the Employment for All award in the category business goes to Grupo SIFU in Spain. Grupo SIFU is a Barcelona-based inclusive company that employs the highest number of people with disabilities in Spain. And currently it has more than 4,500 employees, of which 89% have some kind of disability, and 31% are considered persons with high support needs. They provide companies with several services such as cleaning, environmental services, maintenance, supplies, facility management, and disability law consulting. So congratulations to them.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much for that. I just think that both the winners should just say one word. So please, I invite Simon Ohe of Darfur to acceptance and say one word about your award. Please, Simon, you have the floor. Oh.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the EASPD for choosing us. And I want to say thank you to the Social Ministry Service of Austria for funding our service. And I want to say thank you to all the companies who employ persons with disabilities, and to all of the people who work in the field of supporting persons with disabilities, like our job coaches who work for many years already in this field and who are really successful in Austria. And yeah, thank you a lot again. Thank you for
your words, and congratulations to Darfur. And now I want to give the floor to SIFU, to the representative of SIFU, the Christian Rovira from Spain. Christian.
Hello.
Are you there?
Thank you very much.
Oh, good.
Thank
you.
Thank you, SPD. Thank you, LADAP. Thank you, DEST. It's an honor for us to receive this award, of course. We are just an example of one of the 8,000 inclusive enterprises existing in Europe in more than 13 countries. So that's the reality. The inclusive enterprises are a very important tool for the employment of people with disabilities. And with the effort of everyone, we do our best to support this kind of employment for people with disabilities, and especially with people with high supported needs. Thank you very much.
Great, and congratulations to SIFU, and congratulations, Christian. Okay, that's the end of our little part on this award.
Thank you,
I give the floor back to Luke.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Fabrizio is co-chair of our employment committee. And indeed, we would have loved to do this in Paris. We would have loved to crack a bottle of champagne now to celebrate these promising, interesting practices, but that seems not to be possible, or not yet possible. But sooner or later, we will do that, and we will celebrate together our success and the success of these two companies. Thank you, Fabrizio, for sharing this session. And before, of course, before giving the floor to Mr. Rodolfo Catani, that on behalf of EDF will wrap up this event, I want to hand over to Jim Crow, ESPD president, to wrap up the award celebration. Jim, please.
Thank you. I'm really pleased, everybody, dear delegates and participants, that we've had an opportunity to draw attention to this award, which we would have so liked to have given to Darfur and to Grupo Sifo in person in Paris, but we all know that that was not possible. It is so important. This initiative with ILMA has been fantastically important, but it's lovely to be able to draw attention to the work that's done day in, day out by two important organizations who have won the awards today for their work with disabled people, getting them into jobs, real jobs, and communicating and participating in society. So thank you to Davu and to Grupo Sifo. Thank you also to all of the organizations that submitted nominations for the awards. The awards initiative is going from strength to strength, and we look forward to developing it further in the coming years. So that is all I wanted to say, to thank the work of Fabrizio and the Employment Committee within ESPD for the work that they do behind the scenes on the employment area, and to hand back to our colleagues in ILMA for the closure of this very important meeting, and particularly to Rodolfo Catani from European Disability Forum. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. Are you with us, Rodolfo? You know, Rodolfo, how we value the cooperation with EDF. So it is a great pleasure to have you with us. Rodolfo, please, your conclusions at the end of this first ILMA webinar, co-organized by EPR, NC, Workability International, EUSE, and ESPD, of course, also in cooperation with EDF. Rodolfo, please. Rodolfo, you're muted.
It's okay now?
Now it is okay. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. Dear Luc, Secretary General, Mr. President, Jim, I would like to thank all the speakers for their presentations and interventions. I have allocated 5 minutes, and I promise to stay within this time. And I think, especially for the commitment towards creating a Europe where persons with disabilities face fewer barriers than when trying to mainstream labor market. Speakers have concentrated their contributions on what we envisage to ensure an inclusive labor market and decent work for persons with disabilities. The position paper by the Inclusive Labor Market Alliance states it very clearly. We need financial investment in personalized support and tailored measures to ensure that individuals have the necessary means to live, to learn job and love roles and develop a career. We also need to see a focus on quality of employment. And this means ensuring that persons with disabilities are paid a fair living wage, have access to training and support to progress in their career, and that reforms to social protection systems help workers with disabilities avoiding poverty traps. We are still in the midst of a terrible health crisis of a severity that we have never seen in our lifetimes. Even before the pandemic, persons with disabilities were statistically far less likely to be employed than persons without disabilities. They were also more likely to be in precarious or underpaid jobs. Now, with the advent of the pandemic, the situation has become far worse. It will probably take years to realize how catastrophic the pandemic has been for persons with disabilities, and even longer to recover from the devastation it has caused. So we hope that the new European Disability Rights Strategy, which is soon to be released, will contain clear indications and investment initiatives and investments to improve the situation. And we also hope that the member states will be making employment for persons with disabilities a priority when allocating the recovery and the resilience funds intended to fight the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. I would like to conclude by just saying briefly why we in the disability movement focus so much on employment and why it is so important to make the labor market more inclusive. Employment is a means of avoiding social exclusion. It is not simply about improving financial stability and gaining access to social security. For people with disabilities, gaining employment in the mainstream labor market is a means of having greater control over their life and how to spend it. It is a way of forging one's path in life based on one's talents and interests, and of strengthening links to the communities we are part of. We hope that the statement of ILMA will be a stepping stone in placing more pressure on policymakers to take action on the matter. And we hope to see many more organizations and stakeholders sign on this statement. Because we are living in a worrying cultural environment where the principle of performance is dominant, a culture where we are confronted with the expression of, for example, human capital. Think about Immanuel Kant. He made the distinction between a person being an instrument or a person being a goal. And what less instrumental than a person with a disability? A person with disability must be a goal for society. So I would like to thank you for your attention and wish you all the best for the future of this important initiative that you have taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rodolfo, for your kind and encouraging words. Rodolfo Catani is one of the leaders of EDF, the European Disability Forum, a member of the board of EDF as well. Thank you for your encouraging words, Rodolfo. Maybe it's important to say also at the end of this first webinar that we jointly organized with these organizations, that other European networks can co-sign the statement that we produced. So if we have representatives here of other European networks that are active in this field, and you feel that this document indeed could bring a sort of a positive development at European level, feel free to contact us and to co-sign the statement that is available on the different websites of the organizations co-organizing this. And it was also, the link was also made available in the chat box next to many other documents that we discussed here this afternoon. Maybe as a last word, I would like to thank, of course, the leadership of EPR, NC, EDF, Workability International, EUSE, and ESPD for working on this together in such a pleasant way of cooperation. And I would also like to thank Acel, knowledge manager of ESPD, for organizing this event. So Acel, thank you very much for all the good work you did to bring us together. Thank you very much. And on that note, dear colleagues, let's change the world step by step and develop a more inclusive labor market together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.